What's up fish friends, it's Alex here, your friendly reef dog, and today I'm going to help you eradicate Aiptasia anemones from your reef tank. Now there are loads of options for doing this and all of them have pros and cons, and I'm afraid there is no one perfect solution. So in this video I'm going to talk you through the benefits and disbenefits of every single method so you can decide what will work best for your tank, and I'll also finish up by giving you my general recommendation. Now if you're new to the channel, I put out a video every week with tips on how to set up and maintain an awesome reef tank. So make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out on anything. Right, let's get into it. Aiptasia or glass anemones are one of the most common pests in the hobby. It's easy to think they're pretty cool when you first see them, but that opinion will change quickly as these little tykes multiply rapidly, can sting your corals and look downright ugly. So how do you remove them then? First up we have the manual options, starting with prevention. Aiptasia usually gets into your tank on live rock, macroalgae or attached to coral frag plugs. So starting your tank with dry rock like real reef rock and using clean Cheeto bought from an algae farm is great for prevention, and you should always inspect any corals you buy carefully to make sure there are no tiny apps on the frag plugs. You can also quarantine corals before they go into your display tank for an extra layer of security, although most people won't bother doing that. And even if you go through all of that, sometimes Aiptasia life finds a way. The first method you should consider is manual removal. If you're fortunate enough to find apps on your frag rack or a removable piece of rock, the easiest way to deal with it is to pull the rock out and kill the apps outside of the tank. Now the chances are your rockscape won't be modular enough to facilitate removal without destroying your setup, and you should forget about this if you have any fish or critters that live in your rocks. And manual removal will of course only get rid of the apps you know about, and there's every chance there will be more lurking out of sight. And whatever you do, do not boil your rock. Doing so can release palytoxin gas, which can kill you and your family, and I'm not exaggerating. So if you use this method, you need to be prepared to chuck the rock away. In terms of manual in-tank treatment, you can mix up some aquarium putty and push it over the Aiptasia to completely smother it. That's cheap and easy, but you almost certainly won't be able to reach every app in your tank this way, and they're quite wily little blighters, so may just back away and escape out of another hole in the rock, or just squeeze out the side of the putty. So that moves us onto the death methods. The most common products for killing Aiptasia are Red Sea Aiptasia X and Joe's Juice, and when used properly these absolutely will kill Aiptasia. But it can be difficult to completely wipe out Aiptasia this way. When you reach the needle into your tank, you need to hold it steady and inject the goop into the mouth of the Aiptasia. It's very easy to get this wrong though, and either spray the goop away from the app or accidentally touch the app before you get a chance to shoot. If you do that, the Aiptasia can withdraw and release cells that float off elsewhere in your tank and produce several new Aiptasia. So you need to apply very carefully and commit to repeating the process several times. There are various other liquids you can use too, like boiling RO water, lemon juice, kalkwasser paste, plus a few other more caustic options that I won't go into. With those, all you need is a hypodermic needle to apply the liquid in the same way you would do with Aiptasia X or Joe's Juice. But the same cons apply with these as they do with Aiptasia X and Joe's Juice. It can be difficult to apply in hard to reach spots, you may disturb the app into releasing spores, and there is every chance you won't be able to get every single app in your tank, so all of these death methods are probably more likely to control rather than eradicate Aiptasia. And for all of those methods you'll need to switch off your pumps first. And if you use boiling water, be very careful indeed, as it will probably kill anything else it touches. It's possible that lemon juice can also affect pH in a small tank if you get a bit carried away and use an absolute load of the stuff all at once. All of which is probably why many people will choose a reef safe product like Aiptasia X. Before I move on to natural predators, it's also worth mentioning Mahano wands and lasers. You can buy a Mahano wand for $130 that zaps and destroys Aiptasia. They absolutely demolish anything they touch, so you do have to be extremely careful when applying. And there's still every chance you won't get every app in your tank, so while this is very effective, it might also be more likely to control rather than eradicate apps. So I'd say it's probably more appropriate for Mahano anemones, with which you don't really have as many options. And some people have used a strong laser to kill Aiptasia. But using an expensive intense death ray is probably more suitable for Dr. Evil than it is an aquarium hobbyist, so I'm not going to give this option any more airtime. And if the death methods don't work for you, you can always consider getting a predator. Bergia nudibranchs are a fantastic option. They only eat Aiptasia, so if you get a few of these guys, they'll establish a breeding population and will hunt down and eat any apps they can find. And the only reason these guys aren't the absolute perfect solution for everybody is because certain fish like wrasses will eat them in 3 seconds flat. So if you have nudibranch predators in your tank, move on to the next option, which is peppermint shrimp. You need to make sure you're getting true peppermint shrimp, as there are other similar looking species that won't eat Aiptasia at all. But if you get it right, these guys are a great option, as you can keep them in your tank forever, so they'll stop apps from making a comeback. With that being said, the downsides are that they can irritate and even eat LPS corals, and they're difficult to catch, so removing them if they do turn rogue isn't easy. Which brings us on to fish that eat Aiptasia. The cryptically named Aiptasia eating filefish is a great short-term option for a reef tank or permanent option for a fish-only tank. And that's because they are all but guaranteed to turn on your corals, particularly LPS, when they've eaten your Aiptasia, or just as likely, they'll even leave your apps and go straight for your corals. The good news is they're pretty easy to catch with a fish trap, particularly if you can bait it with one of the corals they've been nipping. And of course there are some butterfly fish that may eat Aiptasia too. The two chief options are raccoon butterflies and the copper-banded butterfly. The raccoon will almost certainly turn on your corals though, so the copper-banded is the safer option. They still may eat zoas, clams and fleshy LPS corals like acans, but they're about as reef safe as butterfly fish get. The downside is that they have a very poor survival rate in captivity, so there's every chance they'll die after only a few weeks or months in your tank. And as with all of the predator options I've mentioned except the nudibranchs, there's still a chance they won't eat your Aiptasia. So you might have to stop feeding your tank for a couple of weeks to encourage them to do so, and even that isn't guaranteed to work. After all, fish don't read books. Now there is an article online from Advanced Aquarists that suggests the Molly Miller blenny can eat Aiptasia, but there are very few reports of this happening in an aquarium setup, so I personally take that option with a pinch of salt. So as you can see, there is no perfect solution, and some options will be better suited for you than others. The death methods can actually make Aiptasia spread because it's hard to get them all, and it's easy to trigger the apps into multiplying further. And the predators don't always eat Aiptasia and will probably do damage to your reef. So what would I recommend then? Well, if you don't have nudibranch predators like wrasse in your tank, Bergia nudibranchs are the best bet. But for most people that's not an option, so to give yourself the best chance of killing every Aiptasia in your tank, and making sure they don't come back, I'd recommend a multi-pronged approach of using something like Aiptasia X or the less mild Kalkwasser paste to kill as many as you can, especially the bigger ones that some predators will avoid, then adding 3 or 4 peppermint shrimp to finish the job. But be prepared to try a few options if one doesn't work for you. Now, because not every method works for every person, I'd love to know your experiences, so share them in the comment section below and tell people what's worked for you and what hasn't. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe for next week. And until next time, happy reefing.